This is Dear Psychopomp. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. This is episode 3, featuring my very special guest, Stacey Olson-Steele. This episode is a discussion of why collaboration is essential at work and at home. Please note that I am not a professional psychologist, doctor, or lawyer. The information and discussions shared in this podcast are intended for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Some of the topics covered may be emotionally intense or triggering, especially for those of you who are still processing grief or similar experiences. So please take care of yourself. And if you feel that any content is too overwhelming, it's important to seek support from a loved one, a trusted one, a licensed professional. Your well-being is important, and I encourage you to prioritize self-care as you listen. Hello, and welcome to Dear Psychopomp, where we navigate the delicate dance between life and death together. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. Stacey Olson-Steele is the amazing human being behind Collaborative Lead Training Company out of Kamloops, BC, where she shares her expertise about the future of collaboration. Her TED Talk not only resonates, it showcases her passion for what she does. Thank you so much for being here, Stacey.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So I've seen your beautiful TED Talk. I've seen your website. And so one thing that really resonated with me is I from what I understand, this company of yours started as let's make the workplace more inviting and really highlighting the importance of the psychological health while you're at work.
Absolutely.
So what I'm wondering is, how has this changed and transformed your life outside of work? How does it translate?
It's taken me such a long time to get here. The brainchild for my company started way back in 2012, before I was married, before I was a mom, before I was divorced. So much has changed in my life over the last 12, 13 years. But I think that having a mindset of being collaborative and wanting to work with others in a way that's productive and appreciated and supportive, it does change my outlook on things. I think I am a better parent. I think I am a better daughter to my single mom. And I think I'm willing to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt. Because working together is really hard, and we do need to sort of give people grace throughout that. So yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot in my life, but my relationships have become better because of it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. So kind of building on that, you know how people say we become the adult we needed?
Totally.
So what happened in your life that you were like, okay, we need to get along?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I'm an only child, and yet I have 3 half brothers, which also tells you that I am a child of divorce. And so my parents split when I was very young. I think I was 2 or 3 when they split. And it was back in the 80s. And, it was not an easy thing back in the day. And there was a very big battle between, who gets what and how that sort of, how the cookie falls and crumbles. And that has certainly shaped my life. My mom and I have been together forever. She is my number one supporter. And, we have a really kind of small family. She has one sister, and my mom is actually I'm first generation Canadian. My mom was actually born in Germany, and so when my mom does family history, it's like all these cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and I can't compute that because we've never really filled up a full Christmas dinner table. There was really only 8 of us: my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle, and my 2 cousins, and my mom and I. And Mom and I lived here in Kamloops, and my cousins and my grandparents lived in Kelowna. And so we were just 2 peas in a pod living here. And I always grew up with this mentality that it would be easier with more people. And I think it didn't really hit me as much until I became a mom. And at the time, I was in living in the Lower Mainland, so I was still 4 or 5 hours away from my mom, and but so much better than I was before because I did spend 10 years living out in Ontario, in Toronto and around southern Ontario, and so that was like a 5-hour plane ride, not to mention the travel time to and from the airport, etc. And so I always knew that family was important, and that we can make our own family for sure, but life is easier with more people to support us, more people around us. So when I was pregnant and had my little guy, who turns 10 in a few short days here, so it's very exciting. Anyway, so yeah,
Double
that's when
digits.
I know, right? Yes, we are you know planning a bumblebee party, like Transformer bumblebees, because we cannot get enough of Transformers at our house. I am certainly a boy mom. But anyway, yeah, when he was born, I realized like little simple things. We had a really great mommy baby group, and there's probably 8 or 9 of us, moms, and it was all our first children, and so that was a really great group to be with. And I remember thinking to myself, if we should just all get together and do laundry together, like that would be so nice. Because honestly, it's these vast time periods of doing sort of very boring manual labor with your child, and really just trying to figure out heads or tails, what's up, what's down. And so that idea of starting life over again as a parent, as a mother, and that's when I really realized, like, I need people around me. And throughout the years, I've done a lot of corporate training, and it's just become so apparent to me, especially, leadership has really changed the way that we look at the world, and and I think people want more from their leaders now. They want different things than what we used to have, and so the workplace has really culturally changed as well. And I think that so knowing leadership has changed, and knowing that the workplace has changed, and fitting all those pieces together. We need people. We cannot live without them. There is no one person out there that has all the answers. So we have to work together. There's no other way. So, yeah.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And we as human beings, we're social creatures.
Absolutely.
We're mammals. We like to hang out with each other.
Totally.
And I think going back to being a child of divorce in the 80s, I'm right there with you. And I remember being in school, and they're like, okay, everyone, what does your mom and dad do? And I'm like, oh, I have a stepmom too.
Right?
And all the kids looked at me like I had 3 heads.
Right? Little did they know.
It was absolutely unheard of. And so I think it was pretty profound for you to kind of grow up. You had community, but your community kept changing.
Oh, absolutely.
And as we grow and we learn, what would you say to someone, and I wonder how this translates with the older leaders too, and the mindset of like, that's just how we've always done it.
Right.
So I wonder how that translates into new leadership, because a lot of things in life are cycles.
Totally. Absolutely.
Fashion, music. We're getting all the remakes of movies
Yes.
now. We have
Yes,
that
I
sense
just saw
of
Snow White
nostalgia.
coming out again. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of 40-somethings that are very excited for it.
I know. Even though it came out way before we were born, I think it came out in the 50s, but it's still kind of exciting. And, I think that's one way that Disney is making itself relevant to mass different generations. So,
And I wonder if
yeah.
this is a cycle of enlightenment, or is this kind of a breakthrough that we're learning from our generations previous? Because it's hard. You have to look forward. You have to move forward.
Oh,
Otherwise, you're
absolutely.
stuck. But so many people are stuck looking backwards. And I think while we're doing that, we're not taking lessons from it.
True. I think North America has been a really interesting place for the last 100 years, I think. And I mean, I think that, a lot of new things have come out of here for apparent reasons. I mean, there's been this sense of independence over on this side of the pond, and many faults with imperialism and colonization, many faults, and we are slowly learning to incorporate all sides of our beingness. And I think that when I'll tell you this, corporate training started easily 100 years ago, but it was all about factory management. And so really we talk about business in terms of machinery metaphors, cogs in the wheel, etc.
Pop the
And
hood.
yeah, right. And what's coming down the pipeline and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the baby boomer generation really wrapped their heads around that free love and burn your bra and all this kind of stuff. And there was an awakening. And then the generation kind of gets to that point where they have to recognize they need stability, they need to live a life within the confines of what systems and structures already exist, etc. And so they do the best they can. And so and I think every sort of generation kind of goes through that upswing of like, this is what we as 20-somethings and teenagers and 20-somethings are bringing to the table. And I think for me, being a Gen X person, like right at the end of Gen X, it's this idea of like reality bites, like the systems and structures we've created actually are not supportive of each other. And so in the 80s and the 90s, we looked around and we realized like, wow, we're living a small nuclear family in a house all by themselves, no family support from outside. We go to work in our singular little cars and we drive by ourselves and we listen to the radio. And then as time passes, now we're not even listening to the same radio show. We're tuning in to, a million different options at all the time. And, even something culturally like, I don't know how many millions of people actually watched the last episode of MASH. And that was in the 70s. And I mean, it was millions of people. Like, this is one of the top rated shows ever watched at the same time by a group of people. But we don't get those numbers now. There's no, Nielsen ratings are very different now. And it just doesn't happen that a whole collective of people are doing the same thing. And so I think this sort of singular individualistic mindset has shown itself for, yes, a lot of benefits, but a lot of downfalls, a lot of things that don't fit with the fact that we are social creatures, and then we ended up with the pandemic, and we actually had to shut out the outside world. And I mean, we were already waking up to ideas like truth and reconciliation. We were already waking up to Black Lives Matter. We were already waking up to the Me Too movement
Mm-hmm.
of misogyny and sexual assault and etc. So there's all this stuff kind of rippling underneath. And then the pandemic happened. And I think that when we return to work, and people are still returning to work, that is still a topic that HR departments are still talking about, which I sort of feel like it's over and done with now. Like we should have had this figured out by now. But I think we're really realizing like we are social creatures, and even though some of us are introverts and some of us are extroverts, it's a spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum, and so we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be dichotomous, this or that. We can be this and that, and different scenarios and different situations. And so, you know, the workplace has really changed because people have changed. We've learned so much. And I think that going forward, you know, the idea of doing more together is actually such a grassroots idea that it has the power to turn the tide. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Mm-hmm. And you're just there ready with your surfboard.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
do this.
Yes. With my whistle and like wrangling the people saying,
Yeah.
let's ride this wave.
Come
We're
on
better
in, the water's
together.
warm.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
also that, before sort of 80s, 90s, and even in the early 2000s, people thought it was a Pollyanna type of an idea that,
Mm-hmm.
we're better together. Like, you know, I would have had many a boss, mostly male, I would say, that would sort of look at me like, yeah, that's ideal. That's not reality. But I think that we, on the grassroots level, are really showcasing the fact that community does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the workplace is part of our community. And, the 7-Eleven I go to down the street is my community. I see these people all the time. And I think that we are also experiencing a lot more climate change events that
Mm-hmm.
become like tower moments, like catastrophic events where everything else, like the pandemic, everything else goes out the table and we just goes out of the room and we just focus on what's important. And what's important is the people in front of us and
Mm-hmm.
beside us. And whether those are blood related family or family that we have created, I mean, it all works. As long as we have the connections, it all works.
Absolutely. The thing that I see quite a bit as a death doula is, first of all, that lingering fear. But a lot of people are scared to be scared and don't dive any deeper to see where that fear is coming from. And like you mentioned with the systems and the structures, our elders today had different systems and structures.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so they're trying to reconcile, but this is how it always was, and that is my comfortable chaos. And
Right.
they are not going after that comfortable peace,
Right.
that or rather uncomfortable peace, because they haven't found that yet, but they're too scared to move on from what they know. And so I wonder how, like, what you would tell someone. Say you were doing a presentation and for a bunch of baby boomers, and they were
Right.
like, change is terrifying. What would you tell them? How would you inspire them to embrace the fact that life is moving forward no matter what,
Yeah.
and they can either ride the wave
Yeah. Or,
or they can stay on the island?
yeah. I mean, ultimately, resistance is futile, and I have felt like that is a bit of a theme anytime I've struggled in life, it's because I'm resisting something. I'm resisting the truth in my head, and I don't find peace until I actually get can match my heart with my head, and those two things are aligned, and then there's a sense of peace and relief. But you know, I mean, it is hard to walk in another's shoes. And there's so much to be said about empathy, um,
Mm-hmm.
and advice that we give. Um, but I mean, I feel like I have gone through so many reincarnations of my own self and my own being. Like even when I was a mom and became a mom, it was a bit of a death of who I was
Mm-hmm.
and turning into who I am going to be now. And I I mean, it depends on what you believe in, I guess, too, because do do we believe in a heaven and a hell? Then there's extra fear, um,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how we see ourselves, and when we get to that point of reassessing and looking back at our life, do we reassess with kindness and compassion and grace for ourselves, or do we reassess with regret and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
grief over the way that we've been or left things? And my hope is to sort of say we're all here to learn. That is the ultimate goal, is just to learn more about what it means to be human, more about what it means to connect with love and you know, be a good, productive member of society. And I think it's one of those things where it's like a roller coaster. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
feel the fear, but we're going to do it anyway. And I think for me, the fear is of aloneness.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is the biggest fear. Like, and you see sort of like dramatic movies, and I mean, it's all part of the plot. And like, somebody is buried alive and they ring the bell, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these things, this is like this the fear comes from the aloneness. And I you know oh, I would just be sort of telling myself mantras over and over and over again about the fact that we are not alone. This body may be separate from others, but really we are energy. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, that's where we will be reincarnated, if that's something you believe in. And I even think that there's a bit of reincarnation going to heaven, in the sense that you don't actually take this physical sack of bones with you. You take the soul,
Yes.
and there is no aloneness in soul. And I think that's one of the beauties of being a human being, is that even if we don't speak the same language, even if we have completely different cultural beliefs and systems, we can still experience another human being.
Yes.
So that's my hope. I don't know if that's inspiring though.
That is very inspiring, actually, because, it's very, very distilled version, but I think personally that 99% of the issues on Earth are created by loneliness,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it doesn't matter what you go through if there's someone else there with you,
Totally.
because
And you know
you're
what?
not alone.
You know you're not alone.
And for people who are lonely, they translate that into anger and violence. And it goes with the community and communication and teaching each other
Yeah.
what we know. Because if
Yeah.
someone was able to say, hey, I see you're angry, tell me why.
Right.
People just want to be heard and seen
Yes.
and acknowledged
Totally.
and
Totally.
accepted.
We don't even have to really fully understand, but we can sense the feelings and the impact that the, you know, when we're in that empathetic, compassionate mindset. Can I tell you something really interesting?
Yes.
There was a study done recently about loneliness in like the workforce, and they found that lonely workers are absent 5 more days a year than their non-lonely counterparts. And the researchers found that this was actually $154 billion a year in the United States. So loneliness is actually costing employers money. You know, and so we take a look at that and think like, man, yeah, wow, why, how? Well, we didn't used to move away from our family. 2, 3 generations ago, we didn't, you
And we
know,
were all living together
and we were all
in the
living
same
together,
house.
right? And you know what? To be totally honest, I'm back now living with my mom and my son. We're a 3 generation household because that's economics. That's how it's working right now. And so it's a funny thing because I do think that that sense of loneliness is something that we've never really been able to pinpoint it as a thing, but it's a thing. It's a real thing, and I think that it is the bedrock feeling for all kinds of society ills. You know, it's a bedrock for it's the bedrock cause for a lot of overdose and drug challenges in this society. It's a
Yes.
lot of the cause for suicide. We can attribute so many things to feeling lonely. And I think as a parent, you know, my biggest thing with my child is connection. You know, that is what I am aiming for as a parent, is to be connected and to stay connected with my child. That anything he tells me, we will and can talk about. And I think that that's why I've spent so much time trying to figure out like what is my emotional state, so that when I reach out to him, that I can really receive whatever he brings to me, you know. And we're pretty solid, you know, at this point. I mean, he's 10, so he's still a little mama's boy, but I
Yeah.
mean, I hope that that goes and carries forward for his whole life, because the connection, I think, beats everything else. I think he's more protected from the ills of the world if he knows he has at least one person who's got his back.
Yes. And that's essentially why I do what I do,
Totally.
because I want people to know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
We may be separated, but you're not alone.
No.
You are not the only person feeling these feelings. You have a complex situation that is different that I can't fully comprehend, but I feel for you. I see you.
Yeah.
And it even, going back to being lonely, we use that as punishment in our
Yeah.
jail systems. Solitary
Oh,
confinement,
huge, huge.
being grounded,
Yes, right? I know. The timeout
the
chair.
the timeout chair. The biggest
Totally.
punishment that we have as children is fine, go be alone.
Yeah.
And it
even
works
back in the day, yes. Even
because
back in
you
the
don't
day,
like it.
you'd be excommunicated, or you'd be sent out into
You're shunned.
right? Shunned from society. Like, you're right. That is our biggest punishment, is just being sent out by yourself, and like, we don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. And yeah.
And not belonging somewhere. And
Yes.
especially in this age where everything is
huge.
digital, we're able to connect
Yeah.
so much easier
Yeah.
instead of, because we have airplanes and we have the internet and we have cell phones.
Right?
And I think it
opened up a
started,
world. Yeah.
it did, it
Yeah.
has. But at the same time, because of loneliness, which leads to anger and violence and sadness and introversion and things like that, we're actually more disconnected than we've ever been, because now we're addicted to social media to keep us company.
Yeah. And so I think that society right now is grappling with that sort of hyper realism idea of like, it is online friendship, can it sustain a person? And I'd say yes and no. Um, if that's all you've got, then yeah, we need that, you know? I think that it's done a lot of good. And I mean, even, you know, getting to see a doctor virtually up north, you know, is such a huge breakthrough. But in real life versus, you know, online, I think we all had a little preview of what that looks like during the pandemic. And
Yes.
I don't discount any of the great, amazing things that we've been able to do with the internet and sort of technical revolutions to be able to connect people. Because I do feel like, you know, since we've been able to reach a wider audience and go global with our ideas, you know, people who live on the edges of society have found their tribe. They've found their people. And I think that's huge. You know, I don't think we would have had, um, I don't think we would have as much knowledge and information about transgender people if there wasn't an internet,
Right.
because the
Yes.
numbers just wouldn't equate to enough to feeling like I belong with this group of people and I'm like other people. Um, and so I do find that that's so important. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we do need face to face. I need the touch. I need the hugs. I need somebody to eat my dinner with. And so I think it's a myriad of managing and navigating all of these interactions throughout our lives, and each one brings something different. And I think that for, like I said, for those who live on the margins of society, the internet has been such a wonderful way of connecting with others that are like them. And that is just huge. So there's part of me that's like, oh, the internet is good, you know? And also the fact that social media is a thing right now, and I think that's because culturally we are learning about other people's stories and being able to be compassionate for other people, and so I think that, you know, being able to hear from others that I would never hear from, you know, is a great thing. But when it comes to crisis, we need people in the flesh. We need people here to hold hands with.
Yes.
And so that to me is the separating point, is that if life is going well, and I've got an online community that I can retrieve acceptance and belonging from and camaraderie and have that sort of flow, that reciprocal flow with people, then everything's good. But when a catastrophic event happens, my house burns down, our community burns down, you know, somebody passes on, somebody in my family passes on. These are catastrophic events, and they sit high on the trauma level. And I think when we hit those sort of heavy trauma events, we need real people.
Absolutely. And we need to be able to resonate. If you
Yes.
think of all your favorite people, you have something deeply in common with each one because you see a trait in them that you admire or you seek. And I think that's why you're able to make such an impact. And going with the trauma, we all have trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only more recently that we've been able to speak openly about it and say,
Yeah.
you know what, screw it, here's my story.
Yeah.
And that's basically what social media is. Here is
Totally.
me.
Yeah.
I am putting myself
Yeah.
out there, and I hope that I can find my people. And being a child of divorce with intergenerational trauma, you know, I have CPTSD,
Yeah.
and I have that trauma. And when I was first discovering the internet, I wasn't looking up silly things or, I mean, obviously cat videos, yes.
Cat videos.
Obviously. But I was able to find a community of people older than me who had gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
They had words, they had labels, they had titles
Yes.
for my feelings.
Yes.
And that was able to bring me into this, oh, this is a thing.
Yeah.
This isn't just me. This isn't
Going
just
crazy in my head. No.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with me.
No.
Inherently, it's I
This
got
is a thing.
unlucky with parts of my family tree, and that's okay. But the main thing is, and it's difficult, it's so easy to stay in the trauma with that familiar chaos.
Yes.
And
that is a tragedy. I think that is the biggest tragedy of our lives, is that when we can't move forward out of that state.
Yes. And that's a state of loss. It's a state of grieving. And you absolutely can get stuck in grief, which is also what I help with, because it's like life is going to happen no matter what. And it's up to you to work through it, but you have to do the work. Like I always say, the healing is in the feeling. So
totally.
with your job to be able to say, hey, I see you, fellow human being. Let's be nice to each other and help each other out and be a community. Do you ever get backlash? Do you ever get people
huge.
just like, I work better on my own and I'm never going to work with people ever again because I hate people?
Absolutely. And it's because we're coming from a lot of these microaggressions and these, I don't want to minimize the trauma, but I want to say that we have experienced trauma in the workplace. Absolutely. For many years.
Yes.
And obviously certain groups are have experienced more trauma than others. And I think that that's where we're at, is we're trying to pull everybody into that perspective of like, trauma exists. It's gonna exist because we have no idea when we interact with somebody. We have no idea, even the people that we so know and have had in our lives for so long, we have no idea what level of self-awareness they're coming at us with in the moment. And so trauma is going to happen. It's not like we need to avoid trauma at all costs. We just need to know how to roll with this and figure it out. And one of the things that I was thinking about while we were talking is the idea that when we come to catastrophe events, New Orleans floods, fires in LA, etc. We had big fires here. We've had many fires here. Landslides, all these things. Does anybody stop and say, what did you vote for in the last election? And what gender are you before I'm going to bring food to you and like offer a hug? No, we don't. Those sort of social conditionings, sprinkled things that define us, go out the window, and we all become human beings.
Yes.
In the same situation. And what I love, sorry, I just hit my headphone there. What I love about collaborative leadership is really dismantling all that social sprinkling of our identity and that sort of sense of ego of like, well, I am this and I am this and this is what I believe and this is what I believe. But really what we're doing is trying to dismantle all of that so we can just be human beings in a situation where a problem needs to be solved. Because we got big problems. We don't have time anymore. The politically and climate wise and financially, there are so much going on in the world that we do not have time to sort of get tripped up by ego.
Yes.
We really have to meet other humans as other humans. We don't have time. We don't have time to look after everybody's ego. But that being said, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're bringing the best human being into the situation as we can. And I love the Maya Angelou quote of like, when you know better, you do better. And that's really all we can expect of people, is that, you know, maybe in past situations, they may have not have brought their best self. And can we just get to that? Because that is a huge door opening to sort of saying like, you know what, I haven't been the best in the past. My marriage fell apart not just because of that other person, but because I didn't do A, B, and C, and D. And I've learned from it, and I'm learning from it, and it may take a lifetime to learn from it, but I am trying. And if we can get to that place, I think we'll be better off. On the flip side, I think that, you know, relationships really are two-way streets, and we've really quite forgotten that as well, because we look at leadership as sort of like parental figures that know best, but they don't always know best. And we're realizing that now. That we are all individuals. Yeah. And so we both have to be willing to speak up for ourselves, but be respected for speaking up for ourselves. We have to be willing to bring our best selves to work, and we have to be willing to tell the other people, no matter their title or authority, that you know what, maybe that wasn't the best, but can we do better? Yes. We can. So there's a lot of work to be done, but
yes. And I mean, the good leader leads by example. And I think that's something that we are discovering because, you know, back in the day, we appointed who we thought was best. And there's some of them are still doing their thing, and some of it was a good decision and some of it maybe wasn't. And
they were educated back then, because not everybody had
for that time period.
Exactly. So we had to have trust in a doctor. We had to have trust in a lawyer or a judge, because they did the specific education for that. But now there's so much information out there, and we have access to so much information, that we expect more from these people.
Yes. Which I think means we're expecting more from ourselves.
Oh, hugely.
And that goes with ego, and that goes with unmet, unspoken expectations. And that's where, the mental health stuff comes in. Boundaries.
Huge. Oh my gosh, I know.
This is how I would like you.
Before I learned about boundaries.
Yeah. And it's just something so simple, like, this is how I would like to be treated. And if you don't treat me this way, then I'm not going to give you my precious time. I get one chance. I get one meat suit on this rock, hurtling through space to who knows where.
Yes.
And I would like to have fun while I'm doing it.
Totally.
And it's so easy to get caught up in making your work your identity. But since, I used to work for the man. I know how it goes. I've been a shift worker since I was 18, and you get stuck in the systems and the structures that we have created for ourselves, and we have income disparity and inequality, and so instead of lifting each other up, we're holding each other down because of our egos and because of comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes. I love that quote.
Me too. I mean, it goes for everything. Trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to be a leader at work because you want recognition because of your ego. And I think that the best leaders are the ones who are able to say, I'm still human.
Yeah.
I'm going
I
to
don't
make
have all the answers.
mistakes.
Yes.
I don't have the answers, but I know how to get them to you. And if we work
Exactly.
together,
We can solve
we can do this.
anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And that goes for any situation I can think of. It is so much easier when we're helping each other out. But on the flip side, I understand why we don't.
Yeah.
Because when people are...
We've been burned.
Yes. And when you get a bruised ego, you are not seeing clearly.
Oh, no.
And that's
Definitely not.
where violence comes from, and crimes, and it just kind of snowballs into that. I could talk about this forever, but it's scary out there because there are people who cannot emotionally regulate themselves.
Yeah.
And they're okay with hurting you.
I know. And here's the thing. I don't think they are. I think they know that things are not right.
I think they know it's wrong.
Yeah. But physically, there is no stopping it. And I mean, you know, I do have a temper. I have been known to throw a cell phone or two, you know. I have broken a remote. I have broken the faucet just because I get so fired up. But, I mean, I haven't been like that for a good, 3 or 4 years now. I look at myself now and I think of all the work that I've done.
Yeah.
And I can now stay in the moment of being like, I am losing my patience and I am going to get to the point where I cannot control my actions. So I need to leave this conversation and I will come back to it. But right now, like, no, stop. I can't. Like, I literally can't. And those are times for a break, But we have to circle back because the reason I got so triggered and so fired up about something still exists. So,
of course.
Yeah. But,
of course.
And so I think this level of sort of self-awareness, we, like I said before, we have no idea what we're meeting when we interact with other people, whether they're coming to us with a strong sense of self-awareness or a very, disillusioned sense of self-awareness. And I mean, we can probably make a nice little list of people who have a disillusioned sense of self-awareness,
Yes.
And is there any reckoning with them? I don't really know. But I think at the end of the day, when we are sitting at that deathbed, I feel like people know.
Well, and some of the things
do
I've heard as a death doula, they're not talking to me and like, you know what? I made so much money. That was cool. They're not like,
I'm in a mountain of dollar bills.
Right?
No.
They're not like, have you seen my bank account? And I'm like, no. They, on their deathbeds, they are reconciling with themselves how their life went. And the things that they say, it's mostly, I should have said this. I left this unsaid with my loved one. Or I should have been a better parent. I should have been a better husband or wife. I was so selfish. And I think that's really profound. And I think that's why I feel what you do is so important, because when it's easy enough for me to go to someone's house and have a candid conversation with them about death, and they can joke around and be comfortable and vulnerable, but doing it the way that you're doing it through the corporate world, because I don't know about you, but when I'm doing work, I have work mode, I have work voice, I have work personality, and you're on in quotation.
For sure.
So when you're able to go into work and they're like, hey, we have a presentation for you today, and your beautiful face shows up, and you're like, let's work together. Let's make your job easier. And then unknowingly, or possibly knowingly, you're teaching them life skills.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
That we have not been taught.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a blast with algebra, don't get me wrong, but I don't use it anymore.
No, exactly.
I wish they would have taught us about empathy and compassion, and it's okay to ask for help.
Totally. You know, it's interesting that you'd say that, because I did spend part of my career as a public school teacher. And coincidentally, well, ironically, I don't know if it's ironic, but anyway, we'll leave Alanis Morissette to figure that one out. But I loved teaching kindergarten. Now, in part because they're just so adoring and enthusiastic about being at school. They want to be older. They want to join the social construct that is school, and they are so adoring of their teacher because it's the first person outside of their family unit that they're really being introduced to, that's going to spend so much time with them and interact with them on that level. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely love teaching kindergarten, but I always joke that, you know, teaching kindergarten was all about social skills. Mm-hmm. And actually, I still do the same thing. I just teach men in suits.
The audience has changed slightly.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Totally different people, but I'm still teaching social skills. Yeah. And I think it's all relative, because I look at your job and I think, oh my God, there's no way I could do that. But I think to myself also, you know, the scariest moment I ever had was my very first job working into a grade 8 classroom. And I had a lovely girl, you know, stand up on the chair and do one of those Arsenio Hall whoop whoop things. And I mean, like, I was about 27 or 28 at the time, and this was like, you know, Mississauga, Toronto area, and it was my first day as a substitute teacher. And I went and I sort of said to her, like, hey, that's not safe, you got to get down. And she was very wiggly in the chair and stuff. And I went and I found my cush ball. And for those of you who are, you know, listening to us, I have a cush ball because it's very silent. It's a silent fidget tool. And I did actually bring, it probably wasn't this one, but I brought one to her and said, you know, like, here you go. This is yours for the rest of the class. And I mean, I was shaking in my boots. Mm-hmm. But what got me through that, and I guess this is a total sideline story, but what got me through that was realizing, like, these guys can't drive. That was what was going through my head to boost up my self-confidence, to be like, listen, grade 8s can be scary. Yeah, because there's a horde of them and there's only one of me. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I know how to drive.
So take that.
Like I got more shit figured out than you guys do. Right? And that to me was like a metaphor of like, hey, I know what's going on here. I'm not, you know, I may have been young and inexperienced on the job, but you know, there's a lot of experience that I have that I can lead these kids in the right place. But right. I do enjoy my life as a corporate trainer much more. And that's just in part because I like the system. Mm-hmm. That corporate training offers me better than the public school system. I think that's really just, it fits my personality. I'm a bit of a free spirit and a bit of a creative, and so I do enjoy being an entrepreneur much more than I enjoy being a cog in the wheel. But yeah, I love it's still teaching. Yeah, it's still teaching, and it's still teaching social skills, because I'm still talking with people about ways to make their life better. And yeah, and here's the other thing too, is that I can walk in and have a whole agenda of all kinds of things that I want to teach them, but teaching doesn't actually just happen. The student has to receive the teaching. Yes. And if the student, much like, you know, substance abuse, if the student does not want to participate or does not want the learning, they're not going to take it. Mm-hmm. So
you can't make someone change.
No, exactly. And I think that has that knowledge of, like, you accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that has really helped me a lot in my career, of just knowing, like, you know what? I'm here to do my job, and if this resonates with you, great. But if not, but I always believe that whenever I do a workshop or a keynote or anything, I always believe that everybody's going to learn something.
Yes.
Because we are reflective, we are social, we will take away something. Even if it's not the list of things that I thought they might learn, they're going to learn something else. Because we are continually learning and creating connections in our own mind and synthesizing what is coming in as information with what we already have in place.
Yes.
You know, like I like to think that we have like a little filing room in our brain, and you know, there's this little like miniature Einstein guy that wanders around and like makes connections and opens up the filing cabinet, and it is like, eureka, this is what this matches with, and you know, he plays a little matching game. And
my little Einstein is very busy. He needs an assistant, and I need more filing space because everyone has something to teach you.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
Everybody.
It might not be a lesson that you want to learn.
No.
And that's okay.
No.
But I think just as we're wrapping up here, the thing that really gets me resonating with you and wanting to support you and learn from you is your value statement. So I'm just going to read it here. We all belong here to help solve problems together.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to find your niche and just teach and be taught and be humble enough to say, I still have things to learn. It's so inspiring.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of you. And I'm so happy that you were able to join us today.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
It's been a delightful conversation. I mean, you know, the world is a full and chaotic place, but I think, you know, self-reflection is going to help us, and really it's just, we are better for the relationships that we have.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
hugely.
And adding on to that, the relationship that we have with ourselves as well.
Gosh, yes. Yes.
Because I'm perfectly fine being alone, because I'm, not to brag or anything, but I'm pretty cool to hang out with.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
You have to enjoy your own company. Yeah.
Yes, totally.
But it's so important to be a part of your own community.
Yes.
In your head.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
I've only just sort of recently been sort of talking back to myself and being like, oh no, that's a disappointing negative thought. We need to like switch that. And I don't know that it's a full conversation, but I think there's like, I'm allowing the different parts of myself to sort of come to fruition, and allowing that kind of discourse to happen in my brain where it's like, whoa, stop. Do not go down that rabbit hole. We're not going there, you know?
Yes.
And that pause has been extremely helpful. So
silence is powerful. Yeah.
Yes. Silence is silence is feedback.
Silence is an answer.
Yes, it is.
If you listen hard enough.
Such a sad answer, though. But anyway.
All right. Well, as we wrap up here, thank you so much for being with us. This is Stacey Olson-Steele, founder of Collaborative Lead Training. You can find her work online at collaborativelead.ca. And you do keynote speaking too, hey?
I do. Yeah. I do.
Awesome.
I love being in front of an audience. So, you know, coming to talk on a podcast is a good place to be.
Good.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for having me. It's been an absolute delight and a joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been an episode of Dear Psychopomp. And remember, the healing is in the feeling. We'll see you next time.
Bye.